I'm Jeff Cook,
And I'm TJ Wilson.
and this is Around the Circle.
I'm walking slowly, I'm taking my time. All I could talking is starting to rhyme. I'm letting go of lonely, letting go of strife. I just can't get enough of this beautiful life.
The Enneagram is a map of the human personality. It's a tool for navigating relationships. It creates language for what motivates us and helps us look at the way we look at everything else. Most importantly, the Enneagram's a mirror because sometimes you need help seeing yourself. My name's Jeff Cook. I'm a philosopher in Greeley, Colorado, and with me is TJ Wilson, businessman, lover of theology, and Enneagram ninja.
Hello.
Hey, boss.
Hey.
It's early morning. We normally don't record in the morning, but today...
It is morning. And I would just like to acknowledge that A, I don't do mornings well, and B, early morning is 11 o'clock. And that is not a joke. I mean, it is a joke, but it is 11 o'clock and it's still kind of early. So my voice is a little bit lower than normal.
One of my favorite jokes was when a guy talking about how when you get the phone call early in the morning and you sound like Elmer Fudd, and he goes, "Hello," and, oh no, I've been up for hours and hours.
Just trying to convince people that the fact that you sound like you're literally still under the covers,
That's right.
it's not real.
Well, I can verify TJ is up out of bed, moving. 11:07.
Yeah,
I mean, you're
it's true.
7 minutes into this sucker. You're fine. You're good
I
to
have
go.
been out of bed for at least one whole hour. I'm just kidding. I've been out of bed longer than that.
Well, we're talking again about relationships on the line. I wanted to set up last time the angle of most of these are romantic relationships, but the more that we kind of got into our conversation, siblings snuck in at that like higher level, depthier level, real understanding that can take place. And I think that's going to come up a lot in our conversation today because two of the pairings aren't very common romantically, I think.
Yeah.
But I bet you it's the case. There's a lot of siblings
Yeah.
that experience this. And so just to kind of earmark that.
Which also might be a window into why there's less romantic partners. Because if your sibling is just like this, you probably don't want to marry that person.
Right.
Yeah.
That's true. I've already got one clown in my life that looks like this. Don't need another in my
That
house.
you can never leave.
That's right.
Yeah.
We are talking about relationships on the lines. So each of us in our type go to stress and can use stress tools to balance. And we also have a type whose attributes we reflect when we're secure. And those are very important to name. And there are people in our lives who live in our stress number or our security number. And our relationships with those people, I find deeply fascinating. This is the first time that we've broken up one of these big topics into three. That's how much we got into the last one.
Right.
Normally we cut these in half and move on, but we're going by triads this time.
Yeah, and I think we went into it with that intention instead of like accidentally just recording too long. So
There's way too much here. We're going to need to
we got to break that up.
put a clamp on the fire hose. One thing that I want to bring a little bit more elevation to this time is as we talk about those who we are in relationship with in our stress number in particular, I think it's important to elevate their stance, their coping style, and their center, because a lot of that is going to actually be tools that we can learn from, employ, and it's going to be the tools of a different type. It's like we're using a different language to communicate, or what would it be? It's we've been addressing this problem with a hammer all day long, and lo and behold, there's a screwdriver that might work.
Sure.
But it's got a completely different action to it. It's no longer the banging. Now you got to turn that sucker.
Right.
And I feel like there's something worth just, I'm gonna just bring special attention. The more that I've thought about our first podcast, I think that those are very important here. So
Yeah.
any thoughts on your end before we jump into the head triad and their move into stress?
Well, I'm just thinking about that hammer screwdriver analogy, because sometimes when you use a hammer to solve a problem and you realize that it's a problem that needs a screwdriver. Now you also have to contend with the damage that you've done from the hammer in order to solve the screwdriver problem, and it's a whole thing. That's a great analogy in my mind.
I think you're picking on the body triad right there. Everybody else is wiser than we.
I don't know about everybody.
Well, we're starting with the combination of 5s and 7s. 5s in stress are going to go to 7. When I first started learning Enneagram, heard a handful of people say this is the strangest move on the Enneagram.
Yeah.
And the more that I see a 5 in my household, this is not strange at all to me.
Right.
This is one of those things that seems to me very natural and understandable given how 5s come to the world, because if 5s go into stress, it means that their tools aren't working.
Right.
And they got to go somewhere else.
Yeah.
And that means they're probably going to get active.
Well, it helps that you also have exposure to a fairly outgoing teenager 7, or a fairly outgoing teenager 5, which means that, stress and inappropriately handling stress is going to be a little bit more forefront for, teenagers, and you're going to see someone who's less likely to be hiding the way that a lot of 5s are.
I wonder if there's something to being a young 5 where using 7 tools is just a whole lot easier.
Sure, I bet.
As opposed to 5s that have kind of entrenched.
Mm-hmm. There's less danger when you're young like that.
Yeah. Especially to get active, to get out of your shell and the rest. His whole world is about getting out of his shell for the most part, being invited into action.
Right.
In terms of like his high school rhythms.
Right.
5s and 7s have a lot in common. Obviously, they're both in the head triad. Both are therefore going to wrestle with fear, going to take in the world with that future focus that has those tinges of fear. Both are going to focus heavily on what they have. For 5s, that can be resources. For 7s, that can be opportunities. Both, it seems to me, can become frantic at times, but maybe that's the 5 moving to 7.
Sure.
In fact, a lot of the commonalities, when we go through the commonalities, it's going to be, you're going to see it in the stress move. 5s can overconsume. Same story there.
Right.
Seems like they both can become obsessed with a specific topic, and maybe that's more the 7 moving to 5 space. But
well, and there's a gluttony represented there with the 7.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Greed and gluttony are sort of right next to each other, like sharing. Yeah. They sit on the same couch. So
I bet as we go through this, we're going to be talking a lot about those 2 ways of coming to experiences and resources, and greed and gluttony are
collection
different.
And consumption. Yeah.
Yeah. Both 5s and 7s seem to appreciate ideas, exert a lot of mental energy when coming to the world. Seems like just like 5s and 8s can be self-reliant and independent, 7s can be self-reliant and independent as well.
Right.
So this 5-7 combo.
Yeah, both these types have a real concern with like part of their underlying sort of fear is that something about them, their needs, their resources is too much or will not be met, will not be fulfilled by the outside world. And so their focus has a lot to do with on how they can take care of themselves.
Mm-hmm. Because 5s, 6s, and 7s are all going to struggle with the temptation, I am what I have. When that gets turned toward other people, 5s, 6s, and 7s, in theory, can use other people as resources.
Right.
There's the temptation to dehumanize the person in front of you as just merely an avenue toward getting what I want.
Right. And not in a conscious and heartless kind of way. Just they view relationships in a different way with a less of an emphasis on that heart center.
Yep. Yeah. Coming again from very different angles, both 5s and 7s can detach from themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And it's worth noting how that takes place. You want to spell that out? suppose I have an intuition, but sevens seem to detach from the negative spectrum of feelings.
Right.
Fives did.
Right. It's with sevens, they're looking for more fun, more entertainment, more opportunity, more, and when you're avoiding like the lower half of experience, because why would anybody want to not have fun when you could have fun? Then you're missing out on a ton of stuff about being human, about living life, because life is not all sunshine and rainbows. There's some bad stuff that goes along with it, and when sevens are escaping that, they're escaping half of themselves essentially.
I may be wrong here, but it's almost like fives are the absolute opposite of the coin in terms of detaching from their physicality and going solely with the inner life of the mental and the emotional.
Sure. But it's again from a different angle, because it might be fours want more of the sort of lower half, but with fives, a detachment from experience is more about focusing on the totality of what can be known and categorization of the data. And so they are aware of feelings, they're aware of the full range of feelings, but they're not engaging with actually feeling the feelings.
Yep.
And that applies to all of the things that they're physically doing, the experiences that can be had out there.
Lastly, and we could play this out on this level as well, both can turn towards narcotics for escape or something of, stimulants of some sorts.
Yeah, every type has their own window into addiction and narcotics and these kinds of things. And I think that sevens looking for more experience, but also trying to avoid negative like pain and suffering. That when you find drugs that make you happy, you might get a little too into the drugs that make you happy. And I think that fives enter into that kind of space from a detachment from the consequences. Like they're not thinking about the addiction. They're thinking about like, this is part of life and I want to know what this is like.
Yep.
Or nothing matters. So why not try this thing?
Yep. Had a philosophy teacher in undergrad said when he was young, he was in school and there was a person with a gong in their dormitory.
Sure.
And he kept trying to find who had the gong. It was like going door to door knocking and say, do you have the gong? Do you have the gong? Do you have a gong? Nobody had a gong. And then he said, and then I realized I was on LSD.
Yeah, of course. Naturally.
The reason for the LSD, I think, is exactly what you're saying. There is an exploration here of I want to understand.
Yeah.
As opposed to the seven that's like, I want to have this experience.
Yeah. I want to fly. Yeah.
Stay away from the angel dust, kids.
Right.
On the flip side, and we've kind of hinted at it, there's a lot that's different about these types. Similar to twos and fours who are on the line but share the same center. Fives and sevens, a lot of the distinction is going to come from their stance. Fives being withdrawn, sevens being assertive.
Right.
Fives are going to hold their energy. Sevens are going to unleash their energy.
Yeah. Fives
have a focused approach to knowledge. Sevens, much more diffuse.
That doesn't necessarily mean that they aren't extremely knowledgeable about certain topics. Like they'll dive. They are full in on the thing that they are focused on until they're not.
For the seven?
And then they're just completely disconnected. Yeah. Yeah. It like a seven who wants to learn how to play guitar will go full in on learning how to play the guitar until they realize that now they want to learn how to play the flute.
Right.
Yeah, they'll buy full in on that until they decide that they want to learn how to do basket weaving. And then they'll buy full in on that, etc.
Feels like some of that is the security move, I think.
Mm-hmm.
You can get into some depth there. when in my field of study, I can identify the fives and I can identify the sevens for the most part. Fives are those who dig down, get a foundation, its roots, and they're spending 30 years on the same project.
Right.
Sevens, their books are 30,000 feet up.
Yeah.
And I can tell you 852 things about this very wide topic.
Yeah.
There's an approach to life that's worth naming here, that fives are more nihilistic. Sevens, traditionally, quite optimistic. I suppose until they're not.
Right. Right. Well, and I think even the five nihilism can be more circumstantial because fives yearn for detachment. Like, this is it. They don't want to be affected by the thing that they don't want to be affected by, and they don't want to have an effect on the world around them. So that nihilism can sort of creep into the side and take over. But I think it starts from a place of objectiveness. They desire to be objective, and if they go too far with that objective desire, that need to be unaffected and unaffective, then, oh wait, it's because nothing has meaning.
I don't know if you're going to like this illustration at all, but I'm going to use it. We've typed the Buddha in the past as a five. Buddha's philosophy the story begins with him seeing an old man, a dead man, and a sick man.
Mm-hmm.
And it's from that spot that he kicks forth the Eightfold Path.
Sure.
Jesus, who I think is a seven, is all optimism. Kingdom of God is like, the kingdom of God is like, the kingdom of God is like, let me show you this thing over here, which is amazing. Even when you look at the beginning of the Sermon on the Mount, the Beatitudes are, here's where things look really tough and difficult. But guess what?
Reframe.
Poor in spirit. No, the kingdom of God is at hand. Blessed are you who mourn. You'll be comforted.
Sure.
It's exactly what that is. It's all reframing these people who are struggling there with those 8 Beatitudes.
Yeah.
Nihilism and optimism.
Yeah.
I like that. I'm going to write that down.
All right.
Rubber stamp that. Actually, you know what? It's already trademarked since it's on our podcast right now.
Perfect.
There is a seeking of understanding for the 5. There's the pleasure seeking for the 7.
Yeah. Yeah.
Again, the physical. There's so much on. I don't know if it's the wings or I should say the secondary centers. The 5 who thinks about their emotions. The 7 who thinks about what to do.
Mm-hmm.
It's how they're going to be in the world.
Well, I think this also gets back into that stance because 5s withdraw and sort of retreat from life to better understand it, and 7s jump into life to understand it.
Yep. When it comes to the emotional life, there's a reservation with 5s. There's a gregariousness with 7s. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's a broad brush, but on the whole.
Yeah.
There is the need for quiet from a lot of 5s. There is the need for stimulation from a lot of 7s.
Right. More noise drowns out the ability to dive deep.
Mm-hmm.
And that explains both types.
Oh, that's good. There's the reserved side of 5s, even kind of the hunkering down turtle-ish methods that 5s can have, whereas 7s can be quite expansive and thin.
Mm-hmm.
Both of them, in terms of being head types, 5s can detach because they're head types. 7s can be superficially engaged, and both of them, there's like I envision kind of a defensive posture towards the world, but this is how that materializes. You know what I mean there?
Say that again.
5s detach, which we say all the time.
Mm-hmm.
But 7s are superficially engaged because they don't want to be locked down. So neither the 5 or the 7 at times are really giving you their full self.
Right.
Like you have to do tremendous work to pull the full self of 5s and 7s into, relational engagement.
Right. Well, I think that, like, particularly thinking about like them as a pair, this is probably like one of the places where it's very reasonable to think this is why you don't see these two paired very often, is because they don't. Neither of them are grasping for the other.
It's a good call.
And they're not. And when they do, there's not much to grab onto.
Yeah. It's going to be one of these yin-yang pairings on that front as well, the withdrawn type and the aggressive type.
Right.
And those can be tricky to make work.
Right. Especially because they're withdrawn and they're aggressive from the same viewpoint. Like it's all about the mental life.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, their center doesn't provide the variety, the complementariness.
Well, and they're going in opposite directions from the same starting point.
Yeah,
Same thing with 2s and 4s.
Yep. That's a good way to put it. So I know a couple 2-4 pairings and a couple 5-7 pairings, and it seems like those relationships, they make it work.
Mm-hmm.
But I bet you intuitively they understand exactly what you're saying there.
Right.
There is a depth and clarity that 5s desire. There's a cornucopic thing. I'm kind of hitting the same themes here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one is expansive, one is... Yeah, I think that like a wide, shallow pond versus a very deep well.
Yeah.
And yeah.
5s expect rejection in relationship. I think 7s are relationally hopeful with relationships that they desire. 7s don't expect to be rejected. There's as we've said in the past, there's a charm to 7s that can come forward. Not that 5s can't be charming, but the optimism. I suppose relationally, is it not the case that optimism is going to color 7's approach to people they want to have a relationship with?
I think yes, but I don't know that I'd ever use optimism, like because being in that aggressive stance, like 3s, 8s, and 7s all believe that like without really consciously thinking about it, that they can order the world according to the way they see it,
Right.
and they naturally have a more positive outlook on things. So it's like why wouldn't this person want to be my friend, you know? or like their perspective on relationships in that way is they don't think about it whether or not they need to impress or do work to draw this person in. It's a natural flow of I'm going to be charming and win this person.
Yeah.
The other side of that isn't a consideration.
Right.
Yeah.
That's exactly it. I suppose where 8s might say, I'm going to win this person because I'm strong, or 3s are going to say, I'm going to win this person because I'm amazing. 7's optimism towards, like, this person's going to fall in love with me.
Yeah. Duh.
Yeah.
Because I'm charming as hell.
Right. See Peter Quill,
Right.
kind of image there. Lastly, problem solving takes on a different road here. The 5 is going to solve problems thoughtfully. 7, optimism again is how they solve. 7s solve problems. 7s can clearly diagnose if they need to, and apply their vast mental energy to a problem, but that's not necessarily how 7s solve problems.
Yeah. Sometimes solving the problem means just getting away from it.
Yep.
Yeah.
And this is part of, I mean, we go into this in our stress and security work that we did earlier this year, but if it became a problem for a 7, it means the 7 wasn't able to think hard enough about the problem in the moment to find an answer, because they live in thought.
Right.
And so if it's become a problem, that means that they weren't able to mentally solve it. And so they're moving into their coping style.
Right.
And now it becomes, well, let's be optimistic about this.
Yeah.
It's clearly a problem.
Or there's not a problem here. Let's go ride bikes.
Yeah. Or let's just ditch this room altogether.
Yeah. Or I should say it a different way, because I feel like I often put sort of a 9 spin on this. Like the positive outlook of sevens is like 9s ignore the problem, just go to sleep to it. But 7s is like they sort of it's more that they just run away from it.
Yep.
It's not there isn't a problem here. It's, oh, look over there.
Right.
It's like, nah, I'll leave this for someone else.
So I've never shared this story before. I used to do church work. I went to a conference in California. It was like this beachside thing, and the person leading it was a 7 who I respect the hell out of. And they served communion to everybody at the very end, the very last thing we did.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted this to be special. And I kind of sat there for a while, and I ended up being the last person to go up.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it just so happened that this person was offering bread. You dipped it in a cup and took it, and then you gave the person a hug. They wanted to just kind of impart, like, I care about you. There was only a handful of people here, right? And I'm the last one.
Mm-hmm.
Take the bread, eat it, go to give him a hug. I uppercut the goblet, and it went flying across the room, and all the rest of the wine just covered these white drapes on this beach side. It was a very nice room, just so you know.
Mm-hmm.
The bill I got, because I was the one who decided to contact the hotel afterwards and say, hey, man, I'm the one that uppercut the wine goblet, was more than what it cost me to stay there.
Sure.
You know, it's like, oh, yeah, we had that dry clean.
Yeah.
It hadn't been communicated to them at all by the person who, I'm sure this was a very expensive retreat. I'm sure they made countless thousands of dollars off of it.
Sure. Yeah.
He didn't even talk to the people about this.
Of course not.
Right?
Yeah.
And just, what is my point here? It's like the moving on. It was like everybody in the room is watching this. And it's like, well, let's go to the next thing. Nobody cleaned up. Nobody spent time. It was anyway.
That's not a thing that we have to worry about right now. Someone will clean that up. It'll be taken care of. I have other things that I want to do that are fun.
That's what I'm looking for. That's exactly what happened too.
And you, the one, want to take responsibility for your mistake, and the 7's like, this isn't a big deal.
Yes.
Yeah. Why are we still talking about this?
Went up and apologized afterwards. That's exactly what happened. Well, that's not a big deal.
Yeah. I don't care.
And of course, one that I could not get that out of my head for the next
And how many years has it been?
12 years later. Pop culture wise, this is one of those romantic pairings. There just aren't very many. And it's for kind of the reasons that we were saying. Mm-hmm. You're moving in different directions. But sometimes I suppose you find yourself in the sweet spot of we're both in the same place at the same time. And this conforms to what I discovered. I think the best example of 5s and 7s in romantic relationship is James Bond and some of the women that occupied James Bond films.
Sure, yeah.
Like, he's a 7, I believe, for the most part, in most of the iterations.
Sure.
And he'll come across a withdrawn, character that is...
Christmas Jones, was that her name? The nuclear scientist, Christmas Jones, played by Denise Richards.
The one that I was thinking of, I vaguely remember this. I think I watch James Bond films once and I go, okay, yeah. It's like the last 22 of these.
Yep.
Except for Skyfall, which is amazing.
Agreed.
And Casino Royale is really great. But the woman in Skyfall actually is a perfect example of it. It's the nuclear scientist is a good example of this. Mm-hmm. It's somebody who knows a crap ton about their specialty.
Yeah.
The adventurous 7 comes in. And then there's we're doing something together. We come together, there's sparks, and we fight the battle together, but there's no roots.
Yeah.
There's no depth here.
Yep.
And then they move on.
Yep.
And unless you are committed to we're doing something together, this probably won't have a relational, roots, the depth that you
longevity.
Just don't have that's what I'm looking for.
But also the 5 and the 7, I think, are very easily suited to the sort of moment in time that this is, because neither of them are especially because they are on this line. They're not looking like the emotional connection is not part of this line.
That's exactly it.
Yeah.
What's interesting is when you then move to siblings or people who are characters in films who come across as brothers and sisters,
Mm-hmm.
the list I have in front of me also very task oriented and
Yeah.
very temporary. All
Sure.
three of them. The first I have is Ted Lasso and Coach Beard, who in the fantastic Ted Lasso series, you'll notice they come together to win championships, either in football or in soccer, or in football, just depending
Sure.
on location at that level.
Yeah.
But for those of you who haven't seen the end of Ted Lasso, there may be a separation that takes place.
Sure.
This was temporary.
But I also wonder, like, without knowing any of the details of that end, because I haven't seen the end of it, I also wonder with a pair like them, they represent, I think, a commitment that acknowledges the limitations of their relationship. In that, like, they both know each other so well that their focus can be the point of their relationship. Like the fact that they are really good coaches together.
Mm-hmm.
They know that. Like they're not going to be like old man best friends playing chess on the porch together. Like they're not going to ever intend to share a backyard, you know. Because they're good at working together. They get each other. They're brothers in the sense that, like, they know what their relationship is.
Yeah.
And they don't need it to be anything more than that.
That's it.
Yeah.
Yep. And they know that they care about each other.
Right.
But it's still the case. You don't have the roots unless it's the common task.
Right.
They come together for the common task. And actually by the end, both of them are actually pulled in opposite directions because of relationships.
Sure.
It's like relationships to other people.
Mm-hmm.
Where they actually do get a different kind of grounding.
Yeah.
Second comes to mind is from the fantastic Jaws. Martin Brody and Matt Hooper come together. They need to kill a shark.
Yeah.
They're not sticking around together after that.
No, of course not.
They have that dynamic energy. They come together. They do the job. Movie ends with them going off into the sunset, but Matt Hooper's leaving. That
Right.
seven has got other adventures, and Chief Brody is going to probably continue to be a police officer on his island.
Probably stick around in the same place that he's always lived.
Last one I got is the Blues Brothers, which I think is a fantastic illustration of this if you go with Elwood as a 5. Elwood might be a different type, but go with me for a second. If Elwood's a 5,
Okay.
they haven't been together for years.
Right.
Jake's been in prison.
Right.
Elwood is a very withdrawn character, it seems to me, and is very focused on his assets, his car and his microphone. When they come together, it's around a thing they need to accomplish. They need to save their orphanage that they grew up in.
Right.
And it's the 7 who has the adventurous idea. We need to start the band. If we start the band, we'll get the money to pay for the orphanage.
And the 5 is, yep, that's right. Let's do it.
He's actually incredibly skeptical, except for he has a religious experience.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
And do you see the light? You need James Brown to yell into your soul.
Which is good advice for everyone.
I mean, there are some things that are miraculous that you just got to name them.
Right.
James Brown music can be up there. But it's the task. The only reason that they stay together at the end is because they're both put in prison together. And now it's, what do you do
They're
when you're in
literally
prison?
stuck together by outside forces.
That's right. But they're brothers. I like this as the image. You see the image here. It's these siblings who have a relationship that has a surge of energy because they're doing something.
Right.
5s and 7s may not be able to keep those relationships together unless they're doing something together.
Right.
Some of the dynamic to move further into this, when in relationship, one of the great things sevens can bring to fives, I suppose, is that they can run interference for private fives. There can be an outsourcing of, of the face of our relationship
Sure. Yeah.
to the
Yeah.
charming seven.
Mm-hmm. The seven who brings all of the energy and is able to communicate with other people and life of the party kind of stuff, and the five who doesn't really want to be noticed at the party.
Yep.
That actually is a big part of the dynamic between me and my best friend who's a seven. So like, I want to be at the party, but I don't want to be like centered. So when I go places with him, it's like, hey, everybody, look at Joey. It's great. It's awesome.
If a 5 and a 7 are in relationship in a business together, this might be also quite valuable. One will have a scarcity mindset. One is going to have a, no, we need to employ all the capital right now kind of mindset. And if they can communicate, there might be wisdom to be found, and you don't get stuck in just hoarding resources or blowing resources. You find the sweet spot.
Sure. But I also think that this can be like, health and balance is always a significant part of how partnerships work. We lean heavily on the wisdom that there are no two types that can't be paired together. It has so much more to do with the health of the individuals involved, and with fives and sevens being sort of business partners or even romantic. I think there's also a strong possibility of the seven being aggressive and unwilling to acknowledge their sort of shortcomings, and the five, like that can easily be something that causes the five's disconnection.
Right.
And in this like scarcity consumption kind of mindset, particularly when the seven is the one in charge of the purse strings, and the five says you need to calm it down. The seven says no, it's going to be fine. Then like that can be a severe rift in between these two.
Yep. Yeah. Agreed. I suppose that's a lot of the complementary relationships that we're in are going to have that dynamic of here's where we're really on opposite sides.
Yeah.
And it might be really beneficial that we come to the world from such places.
Right.
Or it's going to be the thing that drive us apart.
Right.
The wisdom here, like one person I know talks about, some problems are not there to be solved. They are tensions to manage. Mm-hmm. And oftentimes financial spending in particular has that dynamic of, obviously we'd all love to, throw as much money as possible into the things we care about. Obviously, we would love to save as much money as we possibly can so that we have stability and grounding for the future.
Right.
Can't have both.
Right. And you can't do neither either. Yeah. Because if you're spending all of your money on like various projects that you never actually complete or produce fruit, then what's the point of spending all of that money? Like, especially as business partners, like your goal is to grow your business and you're just spending money on frivolous things, that doesn't work. And if you're saving all of your money and not using it to grow, then that's going to be a huge problem.
Yep.
Yeah.
Suppose same thing with your bodies, what you do with your bodies. Mm-hmm. Fives have a tendency to hibernate and sevens have a tendency to flee.
Right.
And you can't do both.
Right.
Both types, however, are going to bring a lot of value to the other type. And so, but let's start with the stress move. When things crash for fives, when it's the case that depth of insight isn't working anymore, they've locked into their very focused little niche, and yet it's not getting them the safety they desire, the life they desire. All of a sudden, their movement, they haven't solved the problems with their head, and they move to use the resources at 7. And if a 5 has healthy 7s in their lives, those 7s are going to contribute something to them. What is it that the relationship on the line here does for the 5?
Well, I think that there's a lot of things there to be pointed at. we've done extensive work on stress and security moves in other recordings, but particularly when you're paired with when fives are paired with sevens, there's a partner to help open the door to the world of possibilities. There's someone who is already on the move, saying, "Yeah, let's go do something." Like movement is a big part of how fives can sort of get out of the funk of their stress. Because like sometimes you just need to change settings, like the eureka theory of like you think about something else and your subconscious mind comes up with the solution. Sometimes you just need to get moving and do something else. And when sevens are already on that path and fives go, okay, I need to get away from this. Like the seven's like, cool, let's go. There's new opportunities ahead. There's things to be had. There's ways to get around this. There's a creativity that fives can't necessarily see because they aren't moving around the problem to view it in different ways. Like there's so much about a lot of the like sevens natural energy and aggression and just sort of pulling into new things that fives need to get out of their hole every once in a while. And the stress move is one of the main things that sort of kicks them out of that space.
In philosophy, there's a line that there is no perspective from nowhere. You're always looking from somewhere.
Yeah.
And if a five has entrenched, they're in that one space, observing from that one space. Sevens often offer movement.
Right.
Let's look at it from over here, and the change of perspective might be the thing that breaks open some of the things the five needs to wrestle with and see from a different vantage point. That, by the way, is where stance comes in. You're moving from withdrawn tools to moving to assertive tools.
Right.
You got some aggressive tools going on now. They're action-oriented tools.
Mm-hmm.
And because you weren't able to solve the problem in your center, now you're using those tools at seven.
Yeah. And even at the most basic level, I think there's a certain amount of like, yeah, they're both head types, and it's a big part of being a head type is that you're concerned about the categorization of data.
Mm-hmm.
But sevens, I think, take all of it a lot less seriously.
Mm-hmm.
And when the five can't solve the problems that they're faced with, then it might be the case that the problem that they're faced with is not a big deal. And the seven helps them take it less seriously.
That was the other thing I wanted to bring up is when talking, for those of you who are more advanced on Enneagram, you can fill in the gaps here. When going to the high side of either stress and security, some of the things you need to elevate are the holy ideas and the virtues. And the holy idea for seven is wisdom. Wisdom is different than data.
Yep.
Wisdom has value judgments all over it.
Mm-hmm.
Wisdom is what ought I to believe, what is good, what is beautiful, what is worthy. It is tinged with something that's just more, it's more than mere data. And if you can get wisdom in your stress number as a five, that's true grounding.
Right. And you can't have complete knowledge without wisdom. And if you aren't getting, again, if you're being moved into a stress place, getting wisdom to understand what to do with the knowledge that you have it's going to be necessary.
Yep. It's perfect. Wittgenstein ends his most famous book by saying, even when all the facts are known, even when all the scientific facts are known, the questions of life remain completely untouched.
Mm-hmm.
That's the end of the Tractatus. The image being that you can know everything there is to know, and yet you still need to decide what to do next.
Yep.
And that takes wisdom. And it's different than just mere knowledge.
Right.
Last side of this then is the coping style. The coping style for sevens is optimism. And in stress, that can be incredibly helpful for fives who might get bogged down in kind of the negative way of viewing things.
Right. Right. And the part of why fives are secretive and to sort of hoard their resources and like, Scrooge-ish about things is because they don't have a positive view of what the world is going to do with their resources.
Yeah.
And part of good stress is letting go of that because you don't actually have control of that in the first place.
Love that. That may be the most time we've ever spent on a single pairing. Well done, us.
I bet cumulatively we've spent an awful lot of time on the 9-1 pairing.
Oh, that's true. You're not wrong. Well, moving to the 3 6s then. Sixes in stress are going to grab hold of some tools at 3. Lots to be said here as well. Yeah. And similar to 5s and 7s, this is not a very common romantic pairing. It can be, but there are very few that I can think of, and I know why I think this pairing would be, on the face of it, would be rather difficult.
Sure.
However, in work relationships and in friendships and perhaps in siblingships, I bet you'll see these pairings coming together.
Sure. I've seen it a lot in workplaces.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's nearly all of my notes end up going down that road.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of assertive types paired with reactive types just get stuff done.
Right.
Because the reactive type is matching their energy to, pairing their energy with the assertive type.
Right.
And so now you have, 2 people doing the task.
Yeah. Another way I might say that, you wouldn't say it this way, but it's almost like a following the leader kind of situation.
Yeah. No, I think that's exactly right. With a lot of them.
Yep.
Or, when I find myself as a leader in most of the spheres that I'm in, and the assertive types that are in my employ, or, who, if Kelly jumps into something that I'm into, I'm setting out an agenda, but they are bringing a ton of the fuel.
Yep. The get it done energy. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and I need that. I react to the get it done energy.
Right.
So, for 3s and 6s, note both these types really gain a lot of their personal value from the community.
Mm-hmm.
And so in work environments, there it is.
Yep.
Lots of hard work coming from 3s and 6s when meeting goals. Especially, it seems to me, financial. And this is for different reasons.
Yes.
3s, I mean, you could speak to this.
Yeah, 3s, financial success is not almost paramount. It's if you are going to be a successful looking person, finances needs to be a part of it.
Yeah.
Money is a big part of the presentation of being successful, and 3s are going to know how to make themselves look successful. So they may not have a lot of money, but they know how to make do well with what they do have.
Yep.
Or at least present well with what they do have. And 6s are terrified about having money. Like this is one of the main sources of support
not
and
having
security.
Money.
Exactly. Yeah. This is one of the most common conversations my wife and I have. She's a 6, and she is very concerned about money all the time. And it's devoid of facts and appropriate constructive thinking, because that is the thing that 6s struggle with. They do unproductive thinking. And so money is a constant concern for them.
Similarly, 3s and 6s can both be very competitive and both be workaholics for the identical reasons.
Yep.
One is about appearance and one is about safety and security and making sure that they don't lose what they have.
Right. And that they don't get kicked out of the group or fired. Yeah.
Lots of desire from 3s and 6s for external reassurance, it feels like to me.
Mm-hmm. And again, coming back to that, the head and the heart, the
Yeah.
Sixes are needing reassurance because they don't trust themselves and they don't trust what people have said. They don't trust the past. And so they need reassurance on a regular basis to do their thinking for them. And threes need reassurance because they identify themselves based on what other people think about them.
Yep.
Or I should say how other people feel about them.
Right, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And both can be conformists and really embrace and engage, elevate what's expected of them.
Yes.
It's again the case that, like, as opposed to the idealists, 1, 4s, and 7s, who can really move to becoming more individual,
Mm-hmm.
or even 5s and 8s, I suppose, can become more individual. 9s can become more individual at times. 3s and 6s, man, are just feel like they're wired for the corporate.
Sort of conformity, yeah.
It's like, here's our body, here's our crew, here's the larger entity.
And they both need to be a part of it. And even in relationship, I think this is part of why we don't see 3s and 6s paired as often, because they essentially become mirrors of each other. And this is one of the things that I've realized about a lot of my relationships with other 9s is we're trying to figure out what to do to keep the peace with the other person. So we're merging with the other person, but when you merge with a mirror, you're merging forever into infinity. So it's nothing. And with 3s and 6s, it's a very similar thing. It's the 6 needs to know what they need to do in order to maintain their position in the relationship. And the 3 needs to know who they become in order to be viewed as successful, to be praiseworthy. And so they're reflecting each other.
That's exactly it.
For different reasons.
Yep.
Just tell me who to be and I'll be it. And the other one is saying the same thing.
Need the feedback. 3s need the reassurance at some level.
Mm-hmm.
6s push for people to respond to, to their anxiety, to their concern for the group, and to tell them, here are the rules and how you stay a part of the tribe, kid.
Right.
The differences are, again, going to be pretty obvious if you've seen these two in action, and a lot of them are going to come from, as you were saying, one's a heart type, one's a head type, and one's aggressive, and one's reactive.
Right.
And a lot of this is going to come out of those places. The primary underlying motive, 3s want attention and success. 6s are all about safety, codependence,
security, and connection. And in a way, these are very, very, very similar.
Yep, as we said.
Because their place in the herd ensures their place in the herd.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just for very different reasons.
Right. I suppose to jump ahead in my list, 1 seems to me much more individual focused. Like 3s, especially average or unhealthy 3s, can become all about themselves.
Yep.
And 6s are not doing that. They are going the opposite direction to a fault.
Right. Right. Well, and the like we make this joke a lot. Like if a 3 goes on a hike in the forest, but it doesn't take its phone to Instagram it, did it really happen? Like it is an elevation of the self, but divorced from the crowd, they have no self. They only know they're successful because they are comparing themselves to other people.
Yeah. Yeah, it's feedback and comparison.
Right.
There is a focus then, because they're part of the community. There's the 3 that wants to appear impressive. The 6 wants to appear as well, but it's more of I want to appear compliant. I want to appear like I'm doing the job, obeying the rules, being part of, the system.
Almost even 3s don't want to be seen as a failure. 6s don't want to get kicked out because of their failure.
Ooh. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good one. Yeah. The focus on how I want to appear and the motive behind that, real interesting.
Mm-hmm.
There's the confident side of 3s. There's the anxious side of 6s.
Mm-hmm.
There's the optimistic side that goes alongside that with 3s. and there's the pessimistic side of sixes.
Right. Which can be great complements to each other, but it's certainly very different and
Yep.
can also be a source of huge frustration for each.
Yep. I think this is the place that the tension, when I see threes and sixes not mesh together, oftentimes the reason is because the three gets frustrated.
Mm-hmm.
And it comes out of this spot that for the three, the future is a place to dominate and be glorious.
Yep.
And for the six, the future is a place of threat and uncertainty.
Yep.
And the three cannot handle that at some levels. If you're going to consistently bring an attitude toward the future that is negative, we can't work together.
Right. Well, and similarly, like the inability to reframe the six's negativity, but also from the six perspective, the inability to trust the three who's constantly moving forward without really like threes are already on Tuesday and the six is like, well, wait, but what about Monday? Come on, we have to deal with Monday too. And that can be a serious place of distrust for the six.
That's a great way to put it. The distrust because we need to shore up what's important now.
Yeah.
And
And we need to consider all of the days. We didn't finish today yet. We need to consider tomorrow too.
Yep.
How are you already on Tuesday?
This is a problem for threes with some other types. For example, ones. That you're doing the job too quickly. You're not doing it well.
Uh-huh.
You need to engage the task at hand.
Yeah.
Because otherwise
we can't cut that corner.
Yeah. It's the corner cutting.
Yep. We can't cut that corner for you because it's wrong. For sixes because we'll get in trouble.
That's what it is. Your efficiency is going to get us in trouble. Yeah. I suppose the last thing I have is that the three really focuses in terms of the tribe on comparison, and the six really focuses on being amenable and part of the tribe. It's like the three wants to be distinct and show off. This is how much different I am, better I am. This is how I'm elevating in comparison with others. Whereas the six, the more they can blend, that would be a value. Yeah.
Sure. Well, I think there's a lot of similarity within the world of comparison, but I think the three, like we can talk about the optimism pessimism issue in like Parrot here as well, because the three is comparing themselves in like it's look how much better I am than this, and the six is like at least like I want to make sure I'm not as bad as this. Or look at the ways that they're failing, kind of like I don't want to be like that because that will get me in trouble.
Ooh. Yeah. One is focused on standing out positively. One is focused on standing out
Blending
negatively.
in positively.
Yeah, right.
Like they don't want to be noticed by the way like there is still a significant level of comparison. But threes want to stand out, and sixes don't want to be noticed for standing out. So it's almost like a positive spin on the comparisons. Like I'm gonna be better so that I stand out. And the six, it's sort of like I want to make sure I don't get noticed by failing.
Yep.
Yeah.
Very hard to find a pop culture reference here. So this is a deep dive. But it's from what I think is the greatest cartoon ever made, which is Miss Frisbee and the Rats of Nim, or it's The Secret of Nim.
Right.
If you haven't seen this movie, it's a delight. It is an absolute treasure. And I think her character, Miss Frisbee, is a mouse whose husband has died, left her with the care of three little baby mice, one of which, Tim, is sick. Everything is a future problem. Everything is gonna Tim's sick. There's a huge cat that might get him. And the plow is coming. This is the heart of this movie. Is they live in this little cinder block. Normally they can move the whole family away when the plow comes and eats up the field that they live in, but their little kid can't move, and so she needs to figure out a way to move her entire house, this cinder block. And it's this story about this little mouse. It really feels like The Hobbit, or it actually feels like a medieval, fairy tale kind of story, but it's set in like Kansas, and there's these rats who have been scientifically engineered, like they were experimental rats, and they now have heightened intelligence. And Miss Frisbee goes to the owl. This owl is this wonderfully animated, imposing figure who tells her to go to the rats and Nim and they'll help. Long story short, she's a 6. It's a great story about being courageous for the sake of your family. But she falls in love with a new guy, and he's a 3, and his name's Justin, and he's one of the main rats.
Yeah.
Deep dive. That was the only pairing I could think of. But it's a tremendous movie, really worth watching.
Yeah.
It appears that you haven't seen this movie yet.
I have no recollection of ever seeing this film. You talk about it all the time.
You should absolutely get Fiona to watch it with you.
That's right. I have a reason to watch cartoons like that.
It's like an hour and 20 minutes. It's kind of scary in some spots.
Sure.
So just know going in. But it's an animated show.
Yeah.
Guy who did who else did he do? It's a real famous animator. He did like Dragon's Lair and other things.
Sure. Yeah.
Anyway, the only non-romantic pairing I had from our conversations is Tony Stark and Rhodey.
Yeah, that works.
Never realized that Tony Stark is a rock star and he has a Rhodey.
But also notice the significant tension in their relationship. Like that.
Yep.
Like I think the 6-3 tension is better represented by Terrence Howard than by Don Cheadle.
Agreed.
And part of that's because Don Cheadle starts to throw some of his energy back at Robert Downey Jr. in a way that I don't think Terrence Howard could.
Right.
Which also makes their relationship more interesting to watch from the outside. We don't need to get any more into that, but like there's a significant representation of someone like when they are paired together, this couple, like you can see the frustration from the 6 of like just do what you need to do on the 3, and the sort of when Tony is frustrated with Rhodey, it has more to do with like, why are you following the rules?
Yep.
Like you get the Humvee, I'm gonna go in the Funvee.
It's correct, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that displays exactly the tension that these will experience.
Right.
Rule follower versus. It's not 7-ish energy from the 3. Like we're gonna have fun,
right?
But it's embrace the delights of success and like this is the highest standard you can have right here.
Right.
Let's shine, baby.
Yeah. Yeah. Don't be bogged down by the rules because we can do whatever we want. It's like, well, actually, no, I can't do whatever I want. I'm in the military. And I'm
in the military. One of the real values is the 3 saying you need to take care of yourself and the 6 saying you need to take care of the community. And if they come together here, it works.
Yeah. And especially because of the importance of not doing one at the expense of the other.
Yeah.
And when these two come together, then the 6 says you need to do what's good for the community. A healthy 3 can say, actually, only doing what's good for the community is really bad for your soul. So like ask for recognition, get them to give you a raise, get them to at least say thank you because you deserve it.
And we'll build on that in a second, because that is the tools that the 6 needs to pick up in stress. Yeah.
Right. And vice versa. The
Yeah.
6 saying to the 3, you know, taking all the credit, not necessarily great. Maybe you should lift up your organization.
I don't know what the opposite looks like, but I can see unhealthy 3s tearing down 6s pretty quickly if they're not healthy people.
Sure. Yeah.
And again, just there's a lack of chemistry, unfortunately, if both of them aren't both real secure
Mm-hmm.
or healthy.
Yeah.
Enneagram Institute says of the problems in this pairing, both 6s and 3s have feelings, but they tend to put them aside in order to get the job done, whatever it is. Their different coping styles can get on each other's nerves by reminding them of their weak spots. That's what came out for me there. The
Yeah.
6's coping style is emotional reaction. So when 6s solve problems, they want everyone around them to feel the same way they do about what they see as a problem.
Right.
And this is something that 3s will have a very difficult time with if they're not empathetic and compassionate.
Right. Well, and they sort of match each other on the doing level of things, but like head and heart, their 6s are repressed in that head space. They don't think productively, and 3s are repressed in that feeling space. They don't feel productively. They don't engage their emotions productively. And so like the 6 looking for an emotional response from the 3 who doesn't feel productively, and the 3 looking for solutions devoid of feelings
Right.
from
Yep.
the 6 who doesn't think productively.
That's a great way to phrase
It's a
that.
huge space of tension.
Yep. What's interesting to me on this front is 6s do really get along well with the 2 other aggressive types, especially with 8s romantically.
Mm-hmm.
But part of that is because of the 8's posture. The
Yeah.
8 wants to help
Mm-hmm.
those the 8 sees as needing help.
Yeah.
That's not how 3s work.
Well, I think the 8 and the 6 can also have more productive arguments,
Yeah, because they're solving problems in similar fashion.
and because the argumentativeness of the 8 can draw out some of the like more aggressive tendencies of the 6 in a counterphobic space.
Sure. Yep.
Yeah.
Let me unpack that real quick. 8s likewise solve problems with emotional reaction. And so
Yep.
they want people to feel a certain way. And so if both of them are this will be a very heightened energy environment, the 6 and the
Right.
8 solving problems, but this
Right.
is how they solve problems. And so
Right.
it will just come out in
Yep.
that way. The 7 is going to meet the 6's haven't you seen all the problems ahead with, okay, take my hand and let's
Yep.
go way over here.
Yep. I have seen all of the problems ahead. Here's how I've already addressed them. Let's
Yeah,
move on.
or
now.
there you go. There's another one.
Yeah.
And that can be a great pairing. So it's interesting in terms of it's not just like aggressive types and reactive types often pair well together, but here's one of the combinations. It's going to be trickier with 3s and 6s.
Right.
So on that front, 6s do pick up some fantastic tools in 3 space. And if
Right.
they have really healthy friends, romantic partners, siblings who are 3s, what do 6s gain from their healthy 3s in relationship?
I think even leaders and bosses, like when there's a good connection there, the 6 can see what the 3 is capable of in a leadership position, and sort of like move toward that level of just like trusting your own instincts and doing what needs to get done. And I think even like at the 3 position, the 3 can showcase and say, hey, I recognize all of the work that you're doing, behind the scenes, and it's okay to ask people to recognize it.
Yep.
Because a 3 will see it and also recognize that the 6 doesn't know how to draw attention to themselves.
Yeah. Can't be underestimated the value of a good hype man.
Right. And 3s are great hype man.
Especially if one of the things the 3s can do is they can engage the past,
Mhm.
and 6s have a hard time engaging the past.
Right.
So if the 3 is saying, do you realize how well you did here, 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 and here? You're
Mhm.
amazing.
Yep.
Trust yourself.
Yep.
Get up and do it.
Yeah.
It'd be
Or
valuable.
or even go demand that raise.
Yeah.
Yeah, you deserve it because of these things, and you need to write this down because you won't remember them when you get into that meeting, and here's why you deserve it.
Yeah.
And also I can tell how that your boss feels about you because I'm better at reading people than you are because
Ooh.
you don't trust them.
True. And those tools, in theory, are available to the 6 when they go into stress, yeah?
Right.
You'll notice, again, the pushing into the individual here. I deserve a raise is self-focused, but it's
Mhm.
not always negative.
Right. Because sometimes you do, and the only thing stopping you is that you won't ask for it.
Right. The assertive quality that can come out in
Mhm.
stress for the 6 can be quite valuable.
Right.
Especially on the high side. There is again, to push into holy ideas and virtues, there's a hopefulness to be found at the high side of 3 that 6s need.
Mm-hmm. And not a blind hope like what exists at 9 on the other in the other direction. It's more of a like a reframing optimism, because the 3s are also still going to be interested in doing the work. So like it's not just like everything will work out for the best. It's a reframing of here's the things that we can do, and with a hopeful bent on it.
Yep.
Yeah.
All of these, it seems to me, kind of come down to a message that it's almost like just overstated towards 6s, and that is, it's okay to engage that gear where you say, pay attention to me.
And I'm worth it.
Yeah. Like oftentimes that's actually what we want from the 6
Mm-hmm.
is more self-awareness, self-concern, protection, like self-advocacy. It's part of your full humanity. If you blend completely into the family, the organization, you don't exist.
Right.
You need to, in order to be you need to have both an anchor in the community and the family and all the rest, but you also need to be you.
Right.
Something you can pick up at 3.
Right.
On the flip side, 3s need to get out of everything being about themselves and how they look. The more that 3s elevate others, see themselves as part of the communal success, do the hard work of slowing down and doing things well for the sake of everybody else. That's some high level skill for a 3.
Right. And prioritizing of what needs to be addressed when in a way that is more concerned about the common good than it is about my own success can help 3s like really become more useful members of society.
Yep.
Yeah.
High level things that 6s naturally know in the life of 3s might encourage is self-sacrifice.
Right.
One of my favorite depictions of a 3 is Tom Cruise in Edge of Tomorrow. That's kind of how the movie ends, is with him, the 3, getting to a place where he's communicating to others. You know, if things go really bad, they say, what do we do? And he essentially says, you take it for the team.
Right.
And that image of, I mean, really high level 3s at their healthiest will sacrifice their reputation for the sake of people they love.
Right.
You know, sometimes you're just invited into that space.
Right.
You can learn that at 6. I suppose on the virtue side, there's faith. Faith is available at 6 for 3s if they're looking for what does the high side of your security number look like.
Mm-hmm.
Faith has enormous energy, grounded energy. It's the bass tones that 3s, I think, need because so much of appearance is superficial and thin. But faith is like actually robust, foundational, steel in your spine kind of power.
Right. And coming back to what I said earlier about with 7s and the like believing they have the ability to restructure the world according to how they think it should be or how it's supposed to be or whatever. Like there's a sense of 3s insisting on doing all of the things in order to make sure things go the way they think it's supposed to. And at 6, at that faith spot, one of the things that they get from faith is that things might work out without your intervention.
Yeah, that's good. 8s, 3s, and 1s need to hear that message.
Yeah. Agreed.
There's a very strange triad there worth exploring, but 8s, 3s, and 1s are just consumed with value through what they achieve.
Yeah.
Last word on this pairing?
I think one of the things that, like, if you are in a 6-3 relationship, I'm sure you're already aware of some of the things that need to be addressed and worked on and what you can do. But I think there's a real sense of understanding that, like, there's so much about you that is similar that you should be leaning on. And you need to understand that it's similar from a different perspective. And like the things that you see about each other that you really do gel well, you will understand your differences if you understand that your gelling is from a different perspective.
Yeah, that's a good word. Last pairing here is the move from 7s to 1 in stress. This is actually a real common pairing in romantic relationships, and I think we'll see why as we kind of play this out.
Sure.
Both are idealists. That can both be helpful and a negative in relationships. Both can express their anger and frustration.
Yeah.
Again, that actually can be a uniting place of all things.
Right.
You're both frustrated about the same thing, actually has some energy behind it.
Right.
Both can prefer to escape. I think 1s are much more inclined when things really break and they don't know what to do to actually say, okay, yeah, I'll leave, and let's get away. Let's just get away from the problem for a while.
But I also think that that's part of where, like we talk about with addiction and 1s, it's often times that it's hidden.
Yeah.
And with other types, like 7s are much less likely to hide their addiction. But when 1s hit that place of frustration and need to escape, it can often be in a hidden way and into things that are bad for them. And they're hiding it because it's bad for them.
And also they lack the charm to to make excuses for it.
Right. I know 1-7 in particular that has a history of driving without being certain that they're sober. And they may also have some other, natural, normal human vision problems. And they just, charm the heck out of telling people that they weren't sober when they drove. It's like, this is not okay, but it is a funny story.
It's hilarious until you hit a grandma on the side of the road.
Yep.
Yeah, both can struggle with self-destructive addictions. And I suppose both in the midst of that can actually be highly self-critical.
Right.
The difference is, I think as we say these, you're going to see the complementariness of the differences, one, and you can also see where these would be great tools for both types.
Right.
1s are more strategic. 7s are more spontaneous.
Right.
Those are both complementary. And it's fantastic when you can surrender your spontaneity to strategy for a minute. It's also great when you're hyper strategic and can surrender to spontaneity.
Right. Right.
There is a self-consciousness that ones hold. There's the nonchalant posture that sevens can hold.
And again, compliments and like you could see how they work together, and you can also see how they sort of draw out better things from each other.
Because they're thinking repressed, ones have to be very methodical in their thinking, whereas sevens are very quick thinkers.
Right.
But because they're very quick thinkers, sometimes they miss. And so there are blind spots for both.
Right. Absolutely.
There is a preference for order that comes from ones, and there's a rejection of orders. Or maybe sevens don't require order.
Right.
Ones can be highly conscientious of others. That's not the case with sevens. There's like a lowered awareness of others.
Mm-hmm.
But again, the lowered awareness of others isn't necessarily a negative.
Well, I'd even drill a little bit further into this and suggest that the ones are hyper conscious of the effect that they have on others, and often to a detriment. Like they're overdoing what they think how they think they are affecting other people.
Yeah.
And sevens are unaware of the effect that they have on, or are overly positive about the effect they have on other people.
That's an excellent way to put that. Sevens are starters.
Yeah.
Ones are finishers.
Yep.
This is a great compliment, and this is a place of true tension.
Significant tension between ones and sevens,
this is
especially
where-
when they work together.
This is where fights break out, for sure. And it's not, and that energy is not coming from the seven for the most part.
Well, the seven's on ready to move on.
The seven might be saying, "Why the hell are you still doing that thing? That was 3 weeks ago."
Yeah.
That actually could be a thing.
Yeah.
And that goes towards, like, sevens are a speed-oriented type. Ones are detail-focused,
Right.
and it's hard to be both at the same time.
Yeah.
Both ones and sevens, because they're idealists, pull others into their stuff. Ones are offering improvement. Sevens are going to offer the adventure and excitement.
Mm-hmm.
If you can find the sweet spot, it can work.
Right.
But it's again the case, and we said this with the ones and fours. Idealists, if they're in relationship, probably need to hammer out space away from each other.
Right. Right. Because the focus for each, like that idealism, can get really contentious because they are certain that theirs is the right thing to be focused on.
Mm-hmm.
And if they don't have space where they can just be themselves and be focused on improvement versus excitement, or excitement versus improvement, then they're just going to be fighting about which one is more important.
That's it. I know of one couple who strike me as a very healthy couple. He will routinely go on a week-long backpack excursion, bring in 3 bottles of scotch and 28 cigars.
Sure.
And she's at home, and it's glorious to get him out of the house, because she's going to nitpick the hell out of their living space and make it the way that she desires, so she can be there. Both of them, that's about atmospheres they want to enter into, experiences they want to enter into.
Mm-hmm.
They look opposite, but they both just want things the way they want things. They have ideals,
Right.
and those ideals aren't complementary. The cigar smoke will get in the way of the house and its orderliness.
Well, and I think even going a little bit further than like that desire to sort of improve the spit, like thinking about these idealists, like there's a fair element of control that we're talking about, and the seven, their control means not being bogged down by details that they think are unimportant, and the one part of their control is in not having chaos, like living in the systems that they've enacted because this is the right way for these things to be done. And when someone else even is present, they are not in control in the same way anymore.
Yep. And yet they come back together in the complementary ways, and it works.
Right.
There's a default that ones have to being serious especially when problems emerge and there's a
Right.
default to enthusiasm or
Yeah.
optimism for sevens. Again, the coping styles really are going to color a lot of this.
Right.
That, what would you call this? Like there's a tightly insistent posture for ones, and there's a undisciplined almost or a loose posture for the seven.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of this comes out of where they find their value. And we've said this before, but the temptation for ones is I am what I do. And
Right.
for sevens, it's I am what I have. And those are different here.
Right. Right. We talked about this a lot with the threes and the sixes, and there's a similar, like, I am what I have for the six, I am what other people think about me for the three. And so, like, thinking about that lens with a lot of these things that we've already talked about, like the one is very concerned about the output, about what things look like, and you have to address the inner stuff, the foundation, to make sure that your house is correct, and like the work needs to be correct and right and good and sound and all of that stuff, because I am what I do, because the output is about, like, if it's not good fruit, then I'm not a good tree.
It's a physical comfort way of being in the world. All the body types want to feel physically a certain way.
Right.
That idealism is there, I think, in terms of like it's not as comfort oriented as a 9 may appear. It's the one. It's I'm going to feel comfortable because things have been organized and ordered in the way that I idealistically envision.
Right. And the 7 wants experiences, wants to draw in and consume life, and so, like, order is less important because maybe order is keeping you back from something fun, and like, spontaneity is more important because you have to be willing to pivot, to turn to whatever's next. And on all of these things, it's I think that I am what I do, I am what I have is such a big part of recognizing both the similarities and the differences.
Order means you're interested in staying here. That is not the objective.
Right.
That's
Absolutely
not.
Yeah.
The I am what I have is I have, as we've said, I have opportunity. I have possibilities. I have new things to experience. All of these, all of these communicate is I am safe.
Yeah.
Because I can always jump.
Right.
Lots of pop culture examples. My favorite recently is from Better Call Saul. I think
Sure.
Saul Goodman and Kim Wexler are a fantastic image of a 7-1 couple.
Who plays Kim Wexler?
Rhea Seehorn, stellar actress, really just bit role player for years and years and years and years, and then she just crushed this part.
Yeah.
And
similar to Bob Odenkirk, and even what's his name?
yeah,
Bryan Cranston, who started the whole thing.
Yeah.
The comedy actress.
Michael McKean.
Michael McKean. Yeah.
I mean, everyone in the writing is so good,
Sure.
and the actors know it, and they just don't miss. It's such a good show. Like, there has never been a character that I have cheered harder for not to die than Kim Wexler. Like it's like I emotionally invested in this person.
Nice.
Anyway, Harry Burns and Sally Albright from When Harry Met Sally might be a good example of a 7-1 combination. She is very nitpicky about how everything gets ordered, and I think he's fleeing pain.
Sure.
Is what it seems to me throughout that movie. So that's, I mean, in terms of, and that may be a number 1 romantic comedy on a lot of people's list. And so
Right.
if you're looking for a pairing, that's a good one.
Yeah. I should watch that again with that in mind. It's been a while.
Voracious appetite from Harry. He's like, he's sleeping with everybody. And,
Sure.
and she's sleeping with nobody.
Right.
It's just very, very picky.
Yeah.
About having, what was it? There's like a line about her not wanting to have sex on the Spanish tile kitchen floor.
Yeah.
And the rest. Anyway, the last line of that, when he makes up with her, is so crushing. It's something like when you realize you want to spend the rest of your life with somebody, then you want the rest of your life to start as soon as possible. And then she says something about her anger. It's like, see, you say things like that and it makes it impossible for me to hate you.
Perfect. Yeah.
It's something like that. The last one I had is like Jack Black and whoever his, the female in the story is normally a 1. So
Sure.
when he's in Nacho Libre, he's like united with a nun.
Yeah.
And that's some order. Or in School of Rock, he's united with the principal, and she's got some rules.
Yep.
and he pulls that principal out of her shell with some
Right.
Fleetwood Mac.
Yeah.
and
So good.
Joanne Cusack's character.
Man, I love Joan Cusack so much.
She's great.
Oh, I just love her.
Lots of non-romantic 1/7s as well. And you see the tension and the complementariness again. The one that pops for me immediately is Chris Farley and David Spade. David Spade might be a 5, but his Tommy Boy character, the M&Ms going into the heater, and like all the jokes are about Chris Farley breaking David Spade's stuff. Am I wrong there?
I'm on board with Chris Farley being a 7 in that, with Tommy being a 7, but I don't know about David Spade because he's so sarcastic.
Okay.
And I don't know any ones who are sarcastic.
I'll think
Like
of
I
one.
get in trouble with ones for being sarcastic sometimes.
You got from shooting from the hip. You got David Spade typing.
I don't know, especially in Tommy Boy because he's such a jerk. I don't have something off the top of my head, but for the sake of your argument, like I get what you're saying, like the chaos of the 7 who's just trying to have fun and the guy who just wants his car to be nice because he spent so much time restoring it.
Chris Farley puts on his coat and rips it.
Yeah.
Catches David Spade masturbating and who like quickly runs over and hides under the covers because he
hides.
got caught.
Uh-huh. And the 7 is making a joke about it. And also trying to draw out like this is not something to be that upset about.
Yeah.
Like it's just a thing that happened. But I can tell that you feel bad, therefore I'm gonna lean on your insecurity about this.
Gonna make the argument in future podcasts on the movie typing podcast feed that we have. We might hit Star Trek, and I love me some 2009 Star Trek with Quinto. I like Spock in that 2009 version as a 1 more than a 5. I think that Nimoy's Spock is definitely a 5.
Agreed.
Quinto's Spock is angry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And he routinely is shown to be angry.
Well, with Leonard Nimoy's Spock, you see someone who thinks about the feelings after he's had them, and or has the feelings after the events even. And with Quinto's Spock, you see someone who reacts to his feelings a lot.
Yeah. There it is.
Yeah.
And is actively trying to repress his sexual energy, his anger.
Yep.
And he's trying to follow the rules.
Right. Do what's appropriate. Yeah.
Whereas Kirk, Chris Pine?
Yeah, Chris Pine.
Yeah. Chris Pine's Kirk, it strikes me as just adventurous. He's going into deep space.
And literally
3 years.
the first scene of him as a quote unquote captain is actually him in the test, where he, instead of following the rules of the test, he found a back door. He found a way out. Like he quote unquote cheated by finding another way. And that's quintessential 7.
Yep. There it is. 2 other ones that strike me just for fun is I like Steve Jobs as a 1, and I love Wozniak as a 7. If you see it, there's a he could be maybe not as aggressive. Maybe I'm wrong there. in the movie, Wozniak is just always thinking of all these new things. Like he's got
Sure.
this watch that's buffoonish, but he's like always thinking about these new things. And
Sure.
Steve Jobs is, I think Steve Jobs is one, the right and wrongness of aesthetics.
Yeah.
Real prominent. And I like Nolan's Batman and Joker as a 1 and 7. We've already
Sure.
talked about the Joker as a 7 in our villain deep dive, but
Mhm.
there's a lot of idealism going on in the Bruce Wayne character in Nolan's telling.
Yeah.
Again, just to emphasize it, just so many pairings of this sort because these are two types that really complement one another. And so you're going to see it in relationships. I think the problems, so let's talk about relationships here. The problems, as we kind of said, are going to revolve a lot around organization, finances, how we spend our time, those elements.
And I think when there are problems, these types will see their situations as a little bit of oil and water.
Yep.
Because like spontaneous and structured are very, very different approaches to life. And when you're sort of stuck in one and trying to use it to solve your problems, then the other option being is essentially the opposite. And like you can really easily see these two seeing things from opposite sides of a chasm.
It's interesting. I have a text thread going with a friend of mine who's a 7, and he's in stress and talking about the things he's doing for the organization he leads. It all sounds 1-ish, and I don't have those problems.
Right.
And all of mine are like, this doesn't matter.
Right.
You should just go. You're winning right here. I don't know why you're even concerned about this.
Right.
And it's so interesting for the 7 to get all, duty, organization, need to hire some other people that do things I don't do.
And black and white. And, yeah.
I have none of the problems, so I'm just living in security. I'm just like, man, that sounds awful. I'm really glad I'm not there, but you shouldn't worry about that. That's dumb.
Right.
But that is I think one of the better illustrations for what does it look like to pick up tools in your stress number is 7s going to 1, because you can see how 7s can get out of control, and you can see how when they enter 1 space, the organizational, I need to get my life in order, kicks in, and that's how they solve, their problem, get
Right.
back into their head.
Right. And also you can't, like, in the 1 space, you might be able to charm your way out of whatever thing that you're doing, but the right thing to do involves these steps.
Yeah, or even you're unable to charm your way out, and so now you're
Right.
stumbling, bumbling, falling into
Right.
1 space.
As
There's-
it turns out, stop trying to charm your way out and like do the thing that you're supposed to do.
Yep. There's a fantastic Michael Keaton movie about him as an alcoholic and called Clean and Sober. And he ends up doing exactly that. It's all charming.
Yeah.
It's all charming. It's all charming until it's the case that the woman he was with overdoses in his bed, and now he's on the run from her family, from the cops, from everyone. The only place he can think of to hide is to go into rehab.
Perfect.
Because
Yeah.
it's anonymous.
Yeah.
But it's also, there's like something in his heart that's kind of crying out for the order.
Right. That he's been running away from.
Yeah. It's a getting out of your head, getting into your body in a different kind of way. 7s are very active.
Right.
Like their secondary center is their body. But here it's a different thing. Yeah.
Well, and I think that we've talked only a little bit about sort of time orientation, and with 7s, like everything is the future. Everything that 7s are going through is the future, and 1s, everything is the present moment. And they're not thinking about the future. They're not really necessarily thinking about the past. They're thinking about what I need to do right now. And when 7s find themselves in that stress place, especially if they have a 1 that they're friends or partners with, like the 1 can be like, okay, here's all the steps that are right in front of you. Stop thinking about tomorrow. Think about right now. What.
Yep.
Don't think about getting sober, Michael Keaton. Think about what you need to do next.
Yeah. A lot of, you'll see this with one of the big things in that movie is that there's an exercise scene
Mm-hmm.
where the person who's, the alcoholic is invited to do push-ups and having a very difficult time getting into their physical body.
Right.
But when you exercise, it invites that I'm here now, present, doing the thing.
Right. Right.
And it replaces, the high.
Mm-hmm.
Exercise gives you a different kind of a natural high that you're trying to replicate with chemicals.
Right.
Sometimes.
Right.
So, boom. Last thing on that move to 1 is notice the holy idea and the virtue. The holy idea is holy order. It again,
Mm-hmm.
that's the high side of your stress number.
Right.
Very worthwhile, and the virtue, the thing that's kicked out is serenity.
Right.
There is a letting go that's taking place there. It's a different kind of letting go than 7's experience in terms of being loose. Serenity is, how would you describe serenity?
There's a sense of 7's running away from things that are negative and unpleasant and not wanting to get stuck. And part of order, part of serenity is recognizing that sometimes this is part of the greater world that we live in, and we can't get away from all of the unpleasantness. And sometimes it's okay to just go through it, and to be sort of like at peace with being in places that you don't want to be.
I suppose a big part in some religious traditions, the holy ideas are going to be like, this is how God is orchestrating things.
Mm-hmm.
For holy order, this is embracing something of everything has its place, or there's part of a plan. I do understand that this is terrible advice sometimes for folks who are really in grief or suffering.
Mm-hmm.
However, sometimes the negative things we experience ought to be seen in that light, and it can be incredibly valuable.
Right. And even if I'm not necessarily on the side of you go through all suffering for a purpose, but something can be received in those places.
Right.
And allowing that to be a possibility, I think, is something that 7s don't do naturally, and they can get from 1.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then you're actually wrestling through the dark emotions.
Right.
As opposed to just running away from them.
Right.
On the flip side, 1s are going to be able to engage 7 tools when they're secure. One thing that's just obvious to me here is that in 7 space, 1's minds are going to awaken. The thinking repression kind of dies off a little bit there. They're engaging their mental life more in 7 space.
And opening up to the world of possibilities.
Yep.
There's a sort of the lack of spontaneity, the detail orientation. There's the present focus. It's almost like 7s aren't looking up. They're not looking around because they're so focused on the task at hand.
Yep.
And
again, on the high side of 7, we talked about this with the 5s. 5s are focused on data, and in 7 space they get wisdom.
mm-hmm.
Notice it's real similar for the 1s. The 1s are focused on the organization and the systems.
Yeah.
But not all systems are wise.
Right.
In fact, a lot of times 1s are going to get cut down by everybody else for implementing systems for the sake of the system.
Right.
Right. And you're not being, it's not a good system.
Right.
A beneficial system, a thoughtful system.
Yeah. We had just you and me the other day. We share a building, and we're still trying to figure out the details of who replaces which light bulbs. And the other day, I noticed that a light bulb was out in a set of 3 sconces. And my mind went through the process of we have to change this light bulb. I started to sort of enter into your system, just years of working with you and thinking about this, and this is right in the front of our space, and this is something that people are going to see. And so I replaced it with a temporary bulb until we find the right light bulb that will match the other 2. And then I asked you about it, and you hadn't even noticed. And it's this beautiful moment of I'm not judging. There's no sense of this everything that you focus on is bad. That's not what this is saying at all. But the fact that you didn't notice, I think, is such a great sign that you're like, this system is not as important as you think it is. And this time is like, okay, good. Let's move on. I don't want to talk about this light bulb anymore, he said after telling the story. So there's a sense of like some systems are good and really important. Some systems are set in place because you need a system, and wisdom might say, this is actually not important. You may want it here, but it's not as important as you think it is.
Yeah. If all of my energy was going into that building right now,
Mm-hmm.
I bet you it would be different. I got a monster project
Right.
somewhere else
Right.
that is sapping all my detail-oriented
Yeah.
energies and
Yeah.
time. But part of this, and this is, so I have ones in my life. I know how neurotic and they can make a person on some of these fronts. The connecting to the world is it's worth naming
Mm-hmm.
on these fronts. How should I say this? You know what the light bulb thing does? It's one of those helpful things that when a one can see that the system didn't work, but everything turned out fine, that's really valuable.
Right.
Just like sixes, we can't remember those examples,
Mm-hmm.
and need to be reminded, hey, do you
Right.
remember when this happened?
Right.
And things went just fine.
Yep.
Ones can get overly detail oriented and not focus on here's what's really important and here's what's secondary.
Mm-hmm.
Wisdom is the art of knowing what to overlook.
Yeah.
There ends up being wisdom at 7 ends up going in that place. I suppose in a future sense though, there with 7s.
Mm-hmm.
On this relationship, it's just like a lot of relationships, but especially this one, it seems to me that it's going to require some shared values,
Yeah.
some shared ideals.
Yep.
If you find those, then they're magnets.
Yep. And really intense and often intentional recognition that you're both idealistic, and you might be idealistic about different things.
Right.
Yeah.
Last word on this relationship. I suppose that felt like the last word, but
Well, I also think that watch out for addiction in this space.
Yeah.
Because the 7 might be fine with it, and the 1 might try to hide it. And neither of them will work that hard on fixing it.
yeah. No, it's no joke when 1s and 7s just get together on their own.
Mm-hmm.
Like there can be a lot of overconsumption. 7s give 1s permission.
Right.
And 1s who are resistant to the present. One great way to be resistant to the present is just to get a big bottle of something.
Yep.
And that will calm you down.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially if the 1 is unhealthy and in a on top of the world kind of space.
Yeah, so you got to be careful there.
Bad news bears.
Can I go on a rant?
Do I have a choice?
So, dear listener, okay, so some of you will not care at all, but two of the more popular Enneagram podcasts in the last couple weeks suggested there are worthy arguments for seeing 1s as the aggressive type and 7s as the dependent compliant type. That 1s and 7s should be swapped. And both these are not small podcasts, and one of them had a guy who apparently is like one of the architects of Enneagram from the 80s and 90s who was making this argument. My friends, this is foolish. Two quick notes here. Your stance is defined by your repressed center, and 1s are not thinking repressed. Damn it. Case in point. 7s are not thinking repressed. 7s are entirely thinking dominant. And so because of that, they can't be in the compliant dependent spot.
Mm-hmm.
And so too for 1s. 1s are thinking repressed, and that is what defines them in terms of their stance.
Right.
The idea here was something like 1s are oftentimes the assertive aggressive type in relationships and in the world. And so there's like this, perhaps it's a mirage, to see them, because 7s aren't always that way.
Right.
This is more importantly, this goes into one of my biggest pet peeves about a lot of the language around Enneagram. This is why you need to get rid of the words compliant and dependent. It's because you could argue that 7s are dependent or compliant in certain spaces, or it appears that 1s are not compliant, are not dependent. 1s routinely don't look dependent or compliant. And that's why those terms for the stance really should get rejected. Well, 1s are is reactive. And if you're a withdrawn type, 1s will look aggressive. I assume it's the case that you think that I have some assertive energy.
Yeah, well, once or twice.
Just occasionally. 1s, when you put 1s around 3, 7s, and 8s, will immediately begin to do, the jujitsu thing with 3, 7s, and 8s. There's energy there. And the one thing the 1 wants is to maintain control of the things that they want to control. And that might come across as, a little bit more assertive in the way that they do things. But oftentimes, I think there's a mirage here. Anyway, long story short, don't drink the Kool-Aid. Just needed to get that into the podcast. It may be the case that some fancy folks with millions of more copies sold than me have been arguing this. It's just not the truth.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you. I
Yep.
appreciate that. Needed to. In a recent recording with TJ and I said, it's my podcast. I get to say whatever the hell I want, which neither TJ or our guest thought was a good move.
I feel like that was 2 days ago, and I have no idea what you said. Doesn't matter.
That's not shocking that you checked out when I was especially saying something controversial. Oh, butterfly. I'll go over here while Jeff torches our work from the last few years.
And in that vein, I would like to add an asterisk to your entire rant.
Do it.
And say, I completely understand your argument. And also for those listeners who are who might have heard that and gone, I get it, but I don't really have a problem with it. That's how I feel. It's like, I completely understand why you, Jeff, do not like the words compliant or dependent. And I don't need to plant a flag in this one.
I'm trying to think of something that really is the misunderstanding of 9s.
Right. This is one of the issues with with stance, is that compliant dependent is not great or comprehensive for the reactive earning compliant dependent triad. All 4 of those words work, and all 4 of them don't work in other spaces.
Yeah.
Aggressive, assertive types, the move against types, those words work. And a lot of people who are in that triad do not like those words. There's no qualms about understanding the word withdrawn.
You just don't want to engage the fight.
It's
the
fine.
Withdrawn types.
It works. It's great. I'm going to go take a nap. That's fine. That makes sense to me.
I mean, to circle back around, I really like systems. I want to improve systems. I want people to get things right so that I feel good in the world.
Yep. And you're not dependent. You're not compliant. You're reactive to the energy of the people around you.
I also like putting my fighting energies into things that aren't really going to result in bloodshed or casualties. I don't know if we've said this. I have that gear, and I know I have that gear that I could really hurt people.
Yeah.
And I choose to direct it towards things that are superficial, because what else do you do with that energy?
Sure. Yeah. And that's also a good thing. I don't think that's just you. I think that's a good thing to know about. That is a great microcosm of a oneness kind of thing. Is that it is, you have to do something with this, and it's inappropriate to do this thing with it. So you're going to put it into a place where it's sort of not wasted, but that it's here because it shouldn't be there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, so I'm in a conversation with a person who is literally talking about taking out firearms based on the news that they consume.
Sure.
And one of the great things they could do is to turn off that news channel
Yep.
and just start really getting passionate about how bad the Colorado Rockies are.
Sure. Great.
You know, and
Perfect.
like use the energy there
Yeah.
in terms of just how frustrated you are.
That's the baseball team, right?
This is correct.
Okay, good.
You got a bunch of I need to improve the world going on, and you're picking the wrong. You're picking a topic that's actually going to do some damage.
Right. Right.
So I suppose I'm aware of this, and so that's why I rant about terms and definitions.
Great. I'll take it all day long.
Anywho, hey, you know what?
What?
It would mean the world to us if somebody would share this podcast. I say this every time, dear listener. You haven't shared this podcast in at least the last 2 months. I know you. Wait, this can be a confessional time. It's time for you to share the podcast. Now I'm getting goofy because I feel all insecure about what I just said about having a
Yeah,
cat where
see,
things are
that's
gonna turn on
asterisk.
some steps. Hey friends, it would mean the world to us if you share this episode with somebody that you love, preferably someone who is a 1, 7, 5, 7. 7's twice on this one.
Yeah.
If they're a 7, they're getting the double dose.
Yeah.
3 or 6, and especially if they're in a relationship with somebody in those on those lines. We continue to meet once a month on Zoom. You can connect with us if you go to aroundthecircle.org, click on events. We have a once a month Zoom time, which has been fantastic.
Nice.
As always, if you have friends who are just getting into the Enneagram, we have a tool. It's called the Start Here podcast. Very easy to find. Recently in the top 10 on iTunes for Enneagram podcasts. Start Here is just our tool for showing people what the Enneagram is and helping them find their type. Very easy to find. If you get into pop culture, our other podcast feed is called Movie Typing. We put all of our pop culture deep dives into that, and we are going to be releasing new episodes here in the next week. 2 new episodes, in fact. It's going to be, which I'm excited about. And aside from that, man, give us some stars and a review. You guys are amazing. You got anything else?
I got nothing, man.
That's it. It's been a long recording. Well, he's TJ Wilson. He's officially awesome. I'm Jeff Cook. And who you aren't isn't interesting. Stay away from the angel dust, kids.
Right.